And so the next pick is where it starts to get tricky. Who do you
Yeah.
draft at number 2 overall? And it comes down to Saquon Barkley versus Bijan Robinson. And if you want to toss Jahmyr Gibbs into that conversation, I certainly think he is worthy of it. So I'm going to pull those 3 guys up into the next tier to start. And then ultimately we can debate it from there. So we have Bijan Robinson, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, and we have Saquon Barkley. And so I'll give you my case, but truthfully, before I dive into the stats behind all these guys who I'm ultimately going, who would you go between those 3 running backs? Because they are studs.
This is really tough for me because, I have kind of a knee-jerk reaction to each of them. Barkley is the guy I feel like, and, honestly, I don't know what the consensus is. I haven't been looking at a lot of, so I'm not sure who people would. I would assume that Barkley, just based on his amazing last year, might be edging some of these guys out. Gibbs is just like lightning in a bottle. And with all that said, I might lean Bijan, which makes me feel kind of a little bit weird because he's probably the one that I pull for the least out of this group. But man, the usage, what I've seen from him on the field, I would probably lean Bijan, even though I would kind of want to take the other 2 guys. What about you?
Yeah, and you know what? Your leaning is exactly right with where I have it too. Bijan Robinson is my second ranked overall, and I will admit, before diving into the guide, I actually had Barkley number 2. I didn't think there was anything that could really move me off it. And then there's a few trends with Barkley that concern me, and then there's just what I learned about what Bijan did once he really took off is just insane. So I'm actually going to try to pull this tab, and we'll go back to the tiers in just a second. But this will kind of give you guys a little sneak peek into the guide.
Of course, the guide. Okay.
Behind the curtain. But to support your boy, it means the world. Great reviews so far. Best first week of sales we've ever had, too.
Nice.
Thank you for everyone there. But back to the actual research. This was insane to me. So you see Bijan Robinson is week 1 through 24, week 1 through week 5. Really just nothing all that impressive. Not bad. 16, 13, 11, 10. It was fine, but ultimately he was just the running back 18 through the first 5 weeks. Didn't seem like he was going to do anything all that special. And then the rest of the way, I scroll down to this, and you just see green, green, green. And so essentially what that green is, this is from RotoViz, one of my favorite resources. Yeah. Green means top 12, black means top 24, and then red would be outside the top 24 running backs for that week. You just see the sea of green here. You see the sea of 20-plus points. Ultimately going running back 1, averaging 22.8 per game, was the best running back over that span from week 6 to 18. He topped 20 fantasy points in 10 of 12 games, was a top 12 running back 83% of the time. You couldn't get more consistent. You couldn't ask for better. And then if you look even closer at these last 3 weeks, 16, 17, and 18, 3 of his top 5 weeks, those came when Michael Penix took over. I know it's a small sample. I don't know why it would be directly correlated, but the workload went up. The snap share went up. And ultimately, so it went from 13.4 carries to 19.75 carries per game. And we can just see the season-long pace here I highlight in the guide here. 397 touches, 2,056 yards from scrimmage, 19 touchdowns, and 388 fantasy points for that second half pace, or not even second half, really, week 6 to week 18, so 2/3 of the year, compared to 289 touches, 1,482 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Clearly, he became significantly more consistent, better spikes. And then the last big part with Bijan, too, was the one thing missing from his game. He was just 9th in 15-plus yard runs. His season long was 37. So when you look at these elite guys, you're talking about Henry, Barkley, Gibbs, Taylor. They all had at least one run of 70-plus yards on the season. And Bijan said that stuck with him, that people think he's not a big play threat. So he had all these quotes. You can see him in the guide about, I'm trying to get those 60 yards, 50-yarders, doing a ton of drills, tons of sprints. Like that was his focus of the offseason. So for him to identify the quote-unquote weakness of his game and then go and attack it so hard, if you get that steady Bijan, but you add a few of these like 50-yard touchdowns to it, my God, he could be insane. So to me, there's some fantasy meat still on the bone with him. And even if not, he was just the best running back in the league for 2/3 of the season. And I will definitely load up on him. So he is my number 2. You can kind of see the spoiler here with Barkley at number 3, but any quick thoughts on any of that Bijan stuff that stood out to you?
No, I mean, you had more numbers than I was bringing to the table, but that all was kind of the eye test, and it made a lot of sense. And one of my thoughts is, you look at week 16, 17, 18, talked about Chase winning leagues, getting into the playoffs. I mean, that's a guy that obviously won a bunch of people leagues as well, because I mean, when you needed him most, I mean, he was putting up, points in the 30s or whatever, pretty consistently. Yeah. And I mean, I remember it playing out that way. I remember through 4 or 5 weeks, us just being like, this guy was, I mean, we talked a little shit, as we're known to do. He's not as good as everybody thought. And then pretty much from the moment we said that on, he was pretty much lighting the world on fire. Like you said, it was with Penix. It's a small sample size, but I mean, I've seen enough to believe in the talent 100%. And I mean, he's talking about adding 50, 60 yard touchdown runs. Yeah, that'd be nice, but I mean, he doesn't need to. He's still probably the best guy out there.
Exactly. Thank you, Bijan owners. We gave him that bulletin board material after saying, maybe Bijan's not as good as we all think. Yeah, right. He clearly tuned into the fantasy fullback.
We did that. You and me did that with Lamar Jackson one year.
Yes, yeah, we're very good at doing that for sure. People love just using the fullback dive as motivation. Friends of the show for sure.
I would be unbelievably. I would not be humiliated. I'd be flattered if I found out one of these guys had some newsprint of you and me talking shit about him up in the locker room.
Oh, that'd be unbelievable. Yeah.
I would love that.
I would be over the moon. I remember AB actually tuned in one time. Remember that before he went off the deep end? Maybe
I do remember that. Right. That was right. A couple of years before he completely lost his mind. But yeah,
that was wild. Yeah. We were this jump start to that. But for number 3, I do have Barkley. I will admit though, I stay up at night sometimes. Like, do I flip Gibbs over Barkley?
I'm leaning Gibbs a little bit. I hate to say it.
Especially if you do play full PPR, you can totally justify it. I mean, Gibbs was the PPR running back 1. I'll outline the case for both. I do have Bijan above both, and regardless of your scoring settings, that's who I am going to keep at my running back 2. But man, I do flip flop back and forth between Barkley and Gibbs, and I'll tell you why. One, with Barkley, everybody looks at that season, running back 1, unbelievable skill, career highs in rushing attempts, 345 yards, 2005, rush TDs 13, half PPR fantasy points, 340, top 5 running back in 41% of his games, even better than Bijan in that, had more spike weeks, had 31 points in 5 games or more, 31 or more points in 5 games, insane. Running back 1, a whopping 62% of the time. It was just the perfect fit. The line is insane. The offense is great and churning. And there actually is meat on this fantasy bone, given that he was tackled at the 1 yard line an NFL high 11 times. What happened then? 10 of those became Jalen Hurts.
I'm sure Jalen Hurts ran those in, right?
Push. And so to think that, again, an NFL high 11 times at the 1 yard line is insane. If even half of those bent his way, we could have been talking about a top 3 all-time running back season for Barkley. He only had 33 catches as well, 2 receptions or fewer. He only had more than 2 receptions, rather, 4 times last year. So what if he catches a few more balls and they need to throw a little bit more? What if a few more touchdowns go his way? There is some real upside here. But unfortunately, Barkley does have I don't try to buy into these too often, but when we're at the top 3, you got to try to pick some hairs and figure it out. There's some curses and trends going against him. So in 20 years, no running back has gone back-to-back as the top running back since LT did it in 2006, 2007. LT was also the last running back over 28 to finish as the running back 1, and Barkley just turned 28. The Madden curse, obviously, we got to worry about. But the big one is the curse of the touches, 370 touches as well as 400 carries. And the Athletic dove deep into this. Barkley finished with 436 carries and 482 touches when you include the playoffs. Since 2010, there have been 17 running backs to hit 370 touches. All but one of these running backs went backwards in fantasy production. 14 of 17 dropped by at least 50 points, and 11 of 17 dropped by 100 or more points. And when you hit 400 carries, it's even worse. In the Super Bowl era, 35 running backs have hit 400 carries. 31 of those 35 scored fewer points by 88%, and no running back has scored more after seeing 400 carries since 2000, and they dropped an average of 141 points. So a lot of curses, a lot of worries. Some of it, it's just so tricky because so much of his yards came before contact and he wasn't taking huge hits. He stayed healthy for the first time in a while, but it is a huge workload to then have to ask this guy again. So all those curses going against him, it does lead me to maybe I do just jump Gibbs over him because there's really no warts to his profile other than, of course, Montgomery, pretty big wart because he's so
Right.
involved.
I mean, that's potentially a big one.
Yeah. But man, it's like, how much do you buy into some of those trends and curses, and does that worry you about Barkley at all?
So, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I feel like I should just say going in, like, it doesn't worry me. I think he's going to be a great fantasy pick.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a great season. We're talking about the difference between him being like number 2, 3, or 4 in your draft. And
Right.
I think that he's clearly solid at any of the. I think you'll be happy if you take Saquon Barkley. He's incredible. But my big thing looking at everything that he did last year, essentially just being the dominant running back in the league, is I looked at the numbers, and I'm not saying it as eloquently as you did, but basically I just assume everything's going to go down a little. And I mean, he's still going to be great, but it's just like, no, he's not going to get more touches than he did last year. That'd be crazy. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to run for as many yards. And I mean, you can have a great season not achieving what he did last year. I mean, also the getting tackled 11 times at the 1 yard line, that does sound impressive. Those numbers are bound to fluctuate quite a bit. I also wonder how many of those where he ran it from the 1 yard line and got stuffed, how many of those where he ran it from 25 out and got 24 yards and got brought down at the 1. I don't know. I'd have to dive a little more deeply into that before I was just like, oh, the guy's due for another 6 or 7 touchdowns just because of that. Of course, we know Hurts is the ultimate running quarterback, but specifically the ultimate 1 yard line running quarterback. That's always going to cap him to some degree. But yeah, I like him as the number 3 pick. Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe a little more exciting. I don't know what to make of Montgomery exactly yet. I've had Montgomery on my team, I think, the last 3 years. He's kind of become like the staple of my team. He's never let me down except when he got injured. The guy always puts up numbers, and obviously that's going to come out of Jahmyr Gibbs' ground pie, I guess you'd say. But yeah, I love Barkley as a pick. But I mean, I think that calling him the 3 or the 4 pick, it's not exactly a concern.
Right. Exactly. It is enough for me to put Bijan above him. It might ultimately be enough for me to go to Gibbs. We'll see, because there are some really intriguing reports coming out of camp here about Gibbs in relation to his role with Montgomery as well. And I'll just say right now, if Montgomery didn't exist, Gibbs would be my number 1 player, maybe even above Ja'Marr Chase, actually probably above Ja'Marr Chase, because he is just insane. He's only had a handful of games without Montgomery, but here's his total. So the first was in week 3 of his rookie season, 9.2, whatever, getting his feet wet. The next one's 27.6, 29.9, 25.4, 26.3, and then 46 points last year to cap off the season. Was insane. And then you also look last year in the playoffs. This was really intriguing when the season's on the line and they had nothing. Montgomery was out there and he played. He had 25 opportunities still, did Jahmyr Gibbs, 14 attempts, 11 targets, 175 yards from scrimmage, and 2 touchdowns for another 35 points when they were facing the Commanders with the season on the line. And to me, that's like, what is that role? Yeah, Montgomery's there, but maybe Gibbs is just the featured back. So he averaged over his last 5 games without Montgomery, 31 points per game, which would be, for the record of all time, it was, do you actually know, who do you think is the highest scoring fantasy season of all time? What player has it for running back?
I would guess LaDainian Tomlinson.
You guessed correctly. Yeah, he hit in that crazy season. I think he had 31
Didn't
touchdowns.
He have 30 touchdowns?
He had over 30 touchdowns. And ultimately, he averaged 30 fantasy points per game. So Gibbs' last 5 without Montgomery actually was better than what we had from LT over that stretch. So insane. That just goes to show you how this guy can absolutely break fantasy football if Montgomery misses time again. Or what I am intrigued by is new offensive coordinator John Morton is starting to talk about him as a potentially more usage. I don't know how you put this genie back in the bottle. Sure, Montgomery, he actually had more expected fantasy point share than Jahmyr Gibbs because he has that valuable touchdown role. But they typically started Montgomery every single game, every series. He was the first back out no matter what. And then they kind of bear down the defense, wear him down, and then Gibbs would come in. They're saying early in camp, and I know this seems insane to be like, okay, camp, first guy rotation through, but they're saying one of the things via The Athletic, one thing that's been clear as practices have unfolded is Gibbs is the first back on the field with the starters. In past years, you'd see Montgomery get the bulk of first carries before Gibbs would take the field. There was a clear pecking order in practice, and then that would translate to games, and maybe it's nothing to read into, or maybe the staff is recognizing he's too talented for a true 50-50 split, was what The Athletic speculated. And if that's the case and you don't even need a Montgomery injury to reach that ceiling, that's where it's like maybe Gibbs does belong as the running back 3. In fact, I will say, again, as much as I really, really love, Bijan Robinson this year, if I had like one draft for all the marbles this year, I might actually just take Jahmyr Gibbs. He's just that much more fun. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'm hearing you just like kind of talk yourself into him right now. I can already tell that you've talked your way into Gibbs going over Barkley just in the
kind of did.
Talking to you like the last couple minutes.
I think I'm going to swap it, and I'll make sure to update the guide and update the rankings. But
I think
he's got all this stuff like working against Barkley, and again, I don't buy into it that much. But when you have so much juice with Gibbs as well, it's kind of hard to put that genie back in the bottle after what we saw.
I think that the thing is with Montgomery is like, I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split. I think Montgomery is actually a pretty valuable piece of the Lions, and I think he's going to be a decent fantasy player yet again. But I just think we're at a point now where, whether you're using him to wear down the defense or punch it in from a couple yards out a couple times a game, something like that, I still think Gibbs is going to put up his numbers, and I think they're going to be pretty impressive. Obviously, I don't want to read injuries into anything like that, but I actually like Gibbs a little more than Barkley going in here, despite the pedigree that Barkley's bringing to the table.
Absolutely, yeah. So a tough debate. And again, we're talking about great after great after great.
Right.
You can't go wrong, but you can be more right, is how that typically boils down. And so I do think I'm going to go Bijan, Gibbs, Barkley when all is said and done, even though it's not how I originally had it. Just the more I talk about it, the excitement I feel talking about Gibbs.
You get a certain inflection. You have a certain tone when you get really worked up about somebody.
My smile just glows.
And I could hear it when you were talking about Gibbs.
Yeah. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.